In terms of the loss of Dan Quinn, defensive coordinator, who's now over in Washington, staying within the division as the Commanders head coach, and you pointed out he took half of the Cowboys roster with him. It seems
He did.
several free agents just following him to Washington. How big of a loss is that going to be for the Cowboys defense?
I think with Dan Quinn, he was just such a staple of that defense. And I'm talking not even just what you saw as a coach. The guys respect Dan so much. I mean, you talk to the guys in the locker room, and Dan was just so well respected and well heard, and most of all, well reciprocated in the locker room. So I think that is a really big part of why you see these free agents following Dan to Washington, because they know the kind of culture he creates and his coaching style and all of that. But I mean, I do think at some point there had to be some kind of change. And I think what you were seeing with the Cowboys defense last year, and it's starting to come out a little bit more now, is maybe players weren't put in the correct position to play up to their skill set. Example, Mozzie Smith. It's just crazy how you look at the guy lost 30 pounds last year. And trying to play him is more DE than anything else, when that's not what Mozzie does, right? Mozzie's a run stopper. He goes up the middle. That's what his bread and butter was in college. And
That's what
so
he was drafted to do.
exactly. And that's not what it seemed like Dan was trying to do with him. And so it's interesting, though. We'll never know what Dan's vision was for Mozzie, but this coaching staff that came in now talked about, Mike Zimmer, Cowboys' newest defensive coordinator, came in to say, what we have to do with Mozzie is, first, he has to recover. He had a shoulder surgery in this offseason. He has to recover, go back to the fundamentals, and we're going to get him back to where he's comfortable as far as weight. And then we go from there. So for me, yes, you're going to miss Dan Quinn because you're used to it, right? You're comfortable. It's something you know. And Mike Zimmer, he's a bit of a hard, you know what? He is
a hard ass. Yeah. No, don't worry. You can swear in this podcast. Yeah.
Well, I'm just saying he has a reputation for being very tough nosed and gonna call you out on like it is, and he has done that already from what I've heard. Mike Zimmer hasn't fully come out yet, but it will eventually, and that's okay. That's what he's there for. He's there to draw the line. So I think what you're going to see is the shift in Dan Quinn, who is very, I'll say uncle-like to these guys, to a Mike Zimmer who's very like, nope, I'm not your friend. I'm your coach. We're going to be here. We're going to win. And it's just going to be a little bit different of a mentality. But I will give Zimmer credit that a lot of people, think he's too tough and too rugged. He does care about these guys. The way he talked about Mozzie and talking about even just taking care of his mental health and all of that was important. So I will give Zim that credit, but it is going to be different. It doesn't mean it's going to be worse or better. We don't necessarily know that yet either, but it's going to be different. And how could it not be? Dan Quinn was a staple. He was in talks of, hey, if Mike McCarthy leaves, he could be your head coach.
Right.
When you lose a guy like that, it is going to be different, especially when you're almost talking about night and day with Dan and Mike as far as their personalities. But I don't necessarily think the Cowboys are worse off with Zim. I do think if somebody could come in and kind of straighten things up, it is going to be Mike Zimmer.